She's a grown person.
Doctor.
Doc, take her upstairs.
Please,
Take her
Doctor.
upstairs.
Doctor, she's
Please.
crazy.
She's an adult, and I would like to talk to her. Please.
To define madness is to claim that one comprehends the very nature of an illogical state of existence. Madness is not something that can be explained, yet it is a manner of being we find enthralling, precisely because beneath its frenzy and collapse of all that is orderly, we detect that there lies some deformed brand of truth.
Hey, John, why are they staring at me like that?
They know.
They know what?
They're like you.
A man fearful of the monstrous offspring he spawned retreats away from the mechanized world inside a radiator to be comforted by the embrace of a burlesque-like woman. Logic disappears, but a new type takes over, and to explore this world of quasi-connections offers an infinite degree of options from a filmmaker. Madness can come from the mind of an individual, being drawn in by a vice until it consumes him completely. Billy Wilder displays this in The Lost Weekend by focusing on details only an obsessive would notice. Madness is often displayed as a descent. Shock Corridor begins on a man investigating into a mental asylum before he begins to slowly sink into the very insanity it houses. To speak of madness is to speak of uncertainty, where all we know is the way things are or are not, may or may not be as they seem. The exploration of madness typically begins with the unravelling of a world, a character venturing too deep into places it need not go, peeling back the layers to discover a truth best left alone. Beginning with Hitchcock's Vertigo, there is unlikely a greater candidate for the thematic of a descent into a maddening obsession. Our protagonist Scotty follows Madeline, a woman who may or may not be who she claims to be, as his professional life is swept up by his own intimate feelings. We follow him through a spiral of time, his dreams, and his greatest fear, the fear of falling. Vertigo is a labyrinth of a piece that creates a psychological map of our character, whose search for truth becomes more and more unbearable. Hitchcock was a master of subjectivity, and in Vertigo, every filmic possibility to display confusion is utilised at such a magnificent spectacle.
I look up, I look down.
The altering of the colour palettes merge the real world with the spectral, and the disorientating camera places us in the very erratic shoes of Scotty. In the search for truth, our protagonist finds what the real world entails, and the reality is far more bizarre than one could have possibly conceived. Madness for Hitchcock is merely a place that anybody can find themselves falling into. But what if the gradual unveiling of reality is something much more bleak, but one we always knew was there? Rather than the overwhelming sensorial spectacle that we denote with madness, The Seventh Continent by Michael Haneke shows a descent into madness that's lucid and clinical. There's no room for the romanticisation of experience, for this is a story of objectivity. The truth is as sparse as it's shown. Upon a family growing more and more desensitised by the modern world, their internal anguish builds and builds by the menacing mechanisations of modernity. their descent into this torment is punctuated by prolonged sequences of static, lifeless objects, filling the basket at the supermarket. The emptiness of the morning routine, the maddening monotony surrounds their life and seems to never end. Madness is all-encompassing, because in this world, it's viewed as normality.
Ja, aber es geht nur, wenn wir systematisch vorgehen.
This gradual descent works in the Seventh Continent because Haneke unfolds a claustrophobic experience that's salient and self-aware. We never at any point are confused as to the type of life on display here. We're going mad precisely because we finally see things for how they really are. A world that betrayed us was not how we originally believed it to be. A similar exploration would be seen in the brothers' Quay short Street of Crocodiles, where we explore the notion of how truth can spiral us downwards. It works on the same level as the Seventh Continent, although the lucidity of this subject is at work in an abstract world. The protagonist becomes disillusioned with his reality as a puppet when his strings are finally cut and he explores his surroundings. The marionette discovers a futility in his own life, as the desolation of artificial pleasures are displayed on such a nightmarish plane. Although this time, the puppet accepts this new reality. Both the Seventh Continent and Street of Crocodiles descend into their unbearable realities through the hyper-focus on one's surroundings. Perhaps their greatest commonality is the display of worlds as what we choose to see.
Widocznie nie stać nas było na nic innego. Widocznie nie stać nas było na nic innego.
For what if there is always partial truth in our thoughts, yet it's those other superfluous connections we form that transport us to a much darker place? Paul Schrader is a filmmaker whose thematics of obsessive outcasts is his most defining narrative trait, but perhaps none display this notion better than in First Reformed. Much like Bresson's Diary of a Country Priest, we follow our protagonist as he experiences a loss of faith. In First Reformed, it's due to an encounter with an environmental extremist that's determined that life is purposeless and we've betrayed God's creation.
You're talking about the next lifetime, huh?
I felt like I was Jacob wrestling all night long with the angel, fighting in the grasp. Every sentence, every question, every response a mortal struggle. It was exhilarating.
The priest Toller, becomes inhabited by this man's biblical premonitions of the world ending, and in this instance, we're presented with both the figurative and literal death of the world. Toller wanders landscapes, as the ceaseless droning sound indicates a world that's barely able to survive.
Every act of preservation is an act of creation. Everything preserved renews creation. It's how we participate in creation.
Toller is almost superimposed against toxic backgrounds, as though he's a caricature of hope and faith, just an archetype of a lie that's painted onto the harsh reality. Yet another signifier that it's not only the reality of what he deals with, but his struggle is that of an internal struggle. Is there necessity in the way he's chosen to live his life, or has it all been for naught? Schrader displaying this through the juxtaposition of divine imagery with the bitter reality of earth.
For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world.
The same apocalyptic terror appears in Kurosawa's I Live in Fear, who treats its protagonist with a similar sense of segregation from its world. Toshiro Mifune plays an industrialist who grows more and more convinced that a nuclear holocaust is going to destroy the world. Although it too plays with the shift in the character's immediate surroundings, moving the family from Japan to Brazil, Kurosawa permeates his protagonist's mental state by measuring him against others. The framing of each scene often separates the protagonist from everyone else that's present. When he looks away, many of the eye lines are pointed directly at him, and when he aims for people's attention, they all miraculously turn away. He stands out, whether it be the light shining on him from above or his insane ramblings. He remains other from the world he so fears. Whereas in other instances of delusional states, they're resigned to, accepted with a sense of resolve. Nowhere is this more certain than in Robert Bresson's Le Diable Probablement.
Coupable sans l'être. Je sais que je suis plus intelligent que les autres, plus lucide. J'ai parfaitement conscience de ma supériorité. Mais si je faisais quelque chose, je me rendrais utile, même si c'est pour très peu, dans un monde qui me dégoûte.
Combining the sentiments of both I Live in Fear and First Reformed, Le Diable Probablement follows a boy that confronts the noise of the world, the environmental destruction, the pseudoscientific overanalysis, the political jargon and philosophic posturing, and accepts that it's all useless. There is no life to be led, and the only solution is suicide.
Si c'est réalisable.
À quoi ça servira? À rien.
Ta gueule!
Notre seule force.
The matter-of-fact method in which Bresson shoots appears the same as The Seventh Continent, but in this case we're not confined to a folie à deux of a family confining themselves away from the world. Here, our protagonist actively engages with the world around him and cannot find any reason to convince him otherwise.
C'est vrai que quelque chose nous pousse contre ce que nous sommes.
Il faut marcher, marcher.
On marche, bah tu lui qui on se pète toujours.
Qui est-ce donc qui s'amuse à tourner en dérision l'humanité?
Oui, qui nous manœuvre en douce?
Le diable, probablement.
In fact, the madness at play here may be that nobody else seems to realise the importance of what the protagonist speaks, with Bresson even incorporating real-life footage to blur the boundary between the fictionality of the boy's actions and its real-world implications.
La Terre de plus en plus habitée et de plus en plus inhabitable.
Le Diable Probablement does not show the madness of a single boy, rather the collective madness of a world incapable of seeing the decisions that it makes and how they're inching themselves closer and closer to their total destruction. For only in a world gone mad could a boy on the verge of death deliver an absolute truth.
C'est tentant. Quoi? Rien.
For madness very rarely isolates itself to an individual. It often spreads. It's a malignant entity that latches onto anyone that it comes into contact with. Scenes of ultimate chaos are often signified by revolutionary acts of violence that stem from nowhere. Or we can look at how the lingering question of what if will never be able to escape a person's mind once the idea has been planted. But some of the even more fascinating ideas of collectivism come when there are no discernible answers, and yet everyone seems to be lured in by the madness. Peter Weir's Picnic at Hanging Rock is the prime instance of a film that takes madness to its cosmic level. Transcending its human perceptions altogether. A girls' school, while on a picnic, all seem to share a similarly sublime experience before they mysteriously disappear. The unexplained mystery of Picnic at Hanging Rock is an oddity for many viewers, as there is no explicit reason why these strange happenings occur. Yet isn't this the very notion of madness? Something inexplicable, something misunderstood. Picnic at Hanging Rock's manic plunge hinges on the atmosphere that it creates, the ethereal soundtrack of a pan flute, the colour grading reminiscent of an impressionist painting, and the esoteric aura of feminine energy only inflames the ancient mysticism of where they presently stand.
Except for those people down there, we might be the only living creatures in the whole world.
Madness is often merely perception, sometimes heightened. However, in Picnic at Hanging Rock, it's a much more intangible and fluid notion. Madness is a physical entity beyond our senses. It's the culmination of a point in space and time where our logic breaks and we're swept into another world, equal parts beautiful and monstrous. For when it comes to dealing with collective psychology, we should never be afraid to abandon all logic. Bunuel is a master of this, and in The Exterminating Angel, wherein a group of wealthy people attend a dinner party only to discover that none of them can leave.
¿Por qué no se fue usted anoche con su novio? Pues, no sé, como todos. ¿Y usted? Lo ignoro.
There's no reason for this abrupt shift in narrative. However, like much of Bunuel's work, it's told through an allegorical image. With such a large cast, he doesn't have the time to go into detail and instead creates large tapestries of characters interacting with one another, moving from one to the other, forming fortuitous connections. In the end, the hysteria builds when it appears that everything is connected, when in reality, none of it is.
Ha llegado el momento. La palabra impronunciable. Sí. H. I. H. H. O. H. Oh, no.
A shared madness emerged through the very means of attempting to exist beside one another. Bunuel suggests that the very act of existing is in itself illogical, is mad.
No puedo más, Gana, no puedo más, te lo juro. No resisto estar pía peinándose nada más media cabeza. La odio. Prefiero el hambre y la sed a tener que soportarla.
The madness for Bunuel lies deeper, less within circumstance and more within the souls of people. For what Bunuel aims to show is how gradual is the slope from normalcy to chaos. For when a madness emerges that forces a character to confront the reality of themselves, that in turn is what turns a person insane. It's a cyclical paradox. It doesn't make sense, and that is the only way that madness can truly exist. It's our expectation of order that many great filmmakers play with in establishing the chaos of madness. In Possibly in Michigan, we experience a nightmarish scenario that can only exist due to its filmmakers' aesthetic sensibilities.
How do I meet the strangest men? They always seem to find me. Remember that time way back when I kissed a guy who ate his women friends?
Similar to Meshes of the Afternoon, it's our semblance of narrative and the attempt to find reason within the diegetic space of the film that makes it such an unnerving experience. By treating it at our level of understanding, we allow for the film to continue to grow rather than accepting that within the world of the film, everything is taking the correct course of action.
I will cut your arms and legs off, one by one, and eat them slowly.
Why?
For love.
Why?
For love.
Madness only needs to begin life as a seed. It does not require a violent explosion for its emergence. Two people can often spur one another on to ensure its spread. The Lighthouse displays how proximity to madness is often all it takes to inhabit it oneself.
You're a goddamn drunken, horse-shitting, short shit liar. A liar!
You have a way with words, Tommy.
Two lighthouse keepers share the intense closeness of not only being isolated away from the world, but in an existence of aquatic mythology. Although on its surface, the cabin fever and claustrophobia of the lighthouse is ever present, with frames closed off at the sides and lighting to ensure that everything appears insignificant and trapped. Yet when we delve beyond this barrier, we find that it is the world itself that's mad. Robert Eggers knows that the Lighthouse is not of our world, and utilises the tropes of horror to take the individual experiences of the characters as symbolic representations of the human spirit. These two being mere vessels that are caught in the cascade, the waves crashing against the rocks below only help to emphasise that no human being can contain this much within them. To do so would be insanity. The world of the Lighthouse is one of symbols, of connotations, where action does not correlate with active meaning. Our characters are lost, shifting between reality and metaphor, even altering their very roles as a character altogether.
You're fond of me lobster, ain't you?
Drunken enough for Ginny Fenton.
I seen it. You're fond of me lobster. Say it. Say it.
In the world of symbols, it's destined to be interpreted, for it's ever shifting, and a world that's constantly changing has no foundation for those that inhabit it. For maybe it's true that all worlds harbour chaos, only more exemplified in the inhabitable regions that man cannot traverse. Apocalypse Now shows that where man is not meant to tread, something from beyond takes over, and all things are viewed anew. The use of double exposure presents two parallel realities existing in the same space and time as one another. The jungle holds its own mystical quality, something shown best in Werner Herzog's Aguirre, The Wrath of God.
Am Weihnachtstag des Jahres 1560 erreichten wir die letzte Passhöhe des Andengebirges und sahen zum ersten Mal in den gelobten Urwald hinab. Am Morgen las ich die Messe, dann stiegen wir durch die Wolken hinab.
Following Spanish explorers as they traverse through the Andes in search for El Dorado, they find themselves fighting against nature itself and a world in which they do not belong. They're incapable of surviving in this place, yet their obsession to claim this place as their own sets in. Led by their leader, a man with an insatiable lust for power, Aguirre represents a thought process that's unsustainable for the world.
Wenn ich Aguirre will, dass die Vögel tot von den Bäumen fallen, dann fallen die Vögel tot von den Bäumen herunter. Ich bin der Zorn Gottes. Die Erde, über die ich gehe, sieht mich und bebt.
The madness of one man aiming to claim dominion over the natural world is a task beyond our realm of reality. Aguirre forces his actions within worlds, resulting in images that should not be, forcing animals where they should not be. The juxtaposition of power and primitivism creates the discordant images of madness that make up the film. Character is exacerbated by environment, and in the case of Aguirre, we're presented with a man fueled by his need to rule the world by any means necessary. Yet in a world so much more powerful than he, we're left with a man celebrating in his kingdom of decadence.
Dann werden wir ganz neu Spanien in der Hand haben. Und wir werden Geschichte inszenieren. Wie andere Stücke auf dem Theater.
But what would this world be without the madman? In Embrace of the Serpent, we traverse the Colombian Amazon in 2 separate timelines. However, in this expedition to the heart of darkness, we do not take the perspective of the outsider, rather that of the native that's accepted and embraced the chaos that is the jungle. Whereas from outside, the jungle is magical and omnipotent, from within, it creates its own logic. The film weaves together the perspectives of ancient power and mystery through the gliding, dreamlike scenes of the vastness of the forest, and interlacing them with the space and temporality of our own intimate experiences. In order to truly understand this place, we cannot fight against it. We're too powerless. It can change and morph into whatever it needs to be at that moment, moving from monochrome to colour, and even in moments of horror, it's its deafening silence that reminds us that it's still there. Its madness will not be a thing of terror if we merely embrace it.
Lass uns gehen. Ich hab schon gesagt, Manduka, ich kann keinen Kompass hier lassen.
Though to embrace such a malevolent characteristic would inevitably lead to a life incongruous to one's own experience, Black Narcissus by Powell and Pressburger sheds the physical skin of one persona to reveal another underneath. Sometimes insanity is perceived as a choice for characters. The hopelessness of living one's life as one chooses is exemplified in Je, tu, il, elle by Chantal Akerman, as a woman attempts to return to normalcy after an immense breakup. For what does it mean to be sane? What is it that's normal? The physical and metaphorical rearrangement of one's life surely can never reach the state of rational when emotion comes into play. The mundane and the meaningful inhabit the same illogical state, and Chantal Akerman forces us to address reality in its absolute form, showing without hesitation how there is no such thing as a normal reality based on the majority of circumstances. Emotion is inherently incoherent, and perhaps love is the most maddening state of existence of them all. This, however, does not apply when we deal with emotion that's been corrupted. How does one display the evil trapped within one's own psyche that views the world through a warped and hate-filled lens? In Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, we follow the mundane an unassuming Henry who happens to be the most unspeakable kind of human being. Accompanied by his friend Otis, which portrays the archetypical gleefully insane criminal, Henry's so much more terrifying because he's empty. Any attempt at conveying an emotion stops dead at his vacant eyes and monotonous voice.
She was a whore. My mama was a whore. But I don't fault her for that. It ain't what she done, it's how she done it.
In many ways, Henry's portrait of a serial killer offers some glimmer of humanity to those who dwell in humanity's underbelly, displaying the dichotomy of a man who in one moment shows some degree of compassion to becoming nothing more than a monster.
It's either you or them, one way or the other. Ain't that right? Open your eyes, Otis. Look at the world. It's either you or them. You know what I mean.
But there is also the perspective of a character like Otis, who is so beyond the realm of reason that they are more chaos than human. Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers takes this premise and lodges us firmly in the driver's seat of the mania in murder. Rather than the outward view of how banal madness and evil can be, Natural Born Killers gives us the subjective view of what it means to be inside that perspective. With unlimited reign, Stone uses different film cameras, different film colouring, non-diegetic sound and lighting, even moving from a film to the medium of a sitcom.
I've loved you since the day we met.
Here, there is no rhyme or reason. It's a view of the world that relishes in violence, and we want a front row seat. But if we were to summarise what madness ultimately is, then it would be the idea of creating a reality that isn't quite so. Returning once more to Haneke, the piano teacher displays with crushing bleakness the harsh reality that can occur when your fantasy becomes the reality.
Ajuste la ceinture d'au moins 2 ou 3 crans. Plus c'est serré, mieux c'est. Et en plus, enfonce-moi dans la bouche des vieux bas que j'aurais préparés.
Our main character removes herself from human interaction with cold disdain. She's emotionless, with no presence of empathy or any comforting behaviour. All the while, her sexual deviancy has reached such an astonishing level of repression that her coldness is all that could conceivably exist, so that this fantasy remains at bay from the real world. And yet the two worlds are connected. Haneke's eye reveals all, as his procedural glare bears everything. There is nowhere to hide. As our protagonist's private life becomes exposed, her misery explodes. That dream was nothing like the reality of what she thought she could have.
Et si t'es honnête avec toi-même, tu avoueras que t'en es un tout petit peu responsable. Non, c'est vrai. Oui ou non?
Oui.
J'ai raison?
Oui, Walter.
Things are not always as they seem, or perhaps how we would have liked to have believed them to be. And cinema has a variety of tools of representing the precarious levels of reality its subjects traverse. In Marat Sade, we follow a version of Marquis de Sade as he directs a play of Jean-Paul Marat inside an insane asylum.
We're modern, enlightened, and we don't agree with locking up patients. We prefer therapy through education and especially art, so that our hospital may play its part, faithfully following, according to our lights, the Declaration of Human Rights.
a political hit piece occurs, and yet we know that it's all nonsense. It's one-sided, only for the benefit of those viewing it. We can't take the actors or anything that occurs seriously. And it's at this point, wherein the madness that unfolds is one whose genesis we can't track.
I must interrupt this argument. We agreed to make some cuts in this passage.
The fourth wall of the film is demolished as we lose track of what's the fiction of the film, if we the audience are being addressed. Essentially, where does the real end and the fiction begin?
Mara, these cells of the inner self are worse than the deepest stone dungeon. And as long as they are locked, all your revolution is but a prison mutiny, to be put down by corrupted fellow prisoners.
Mephisto shows how images impact our reality, and how a person can merely alter their appearance, their costume, their manner of conduct, and seemingly become a new person.
Toi, toi, toi. Machen Sie weiter so, Mephisto.
Set in the theatre during the rise of the Third Reich, yet the film is more about personas than it is about Nazism. Ultimately, all of the people within Mephisto are opportunistic. They can live lives that do not correlate with one another. But it's okay, as reality is malleable and shifts with the symbols we apply to it. The swastika becomes a mere mask that can transform into something else, just as our protagonist can shed his face paint if he so chooses. For perhaps it's the nature of the artificial itself where the madness truly lies. Film. We watch people craft false narratives in front of our eyes and manipulate until they find what they believe is truth. Which brings us to the maddened heart of the medium, symbio-psychotaxiplasm.
But anyway, Terry, your job is that you're the person that is in charge of filming this film being filmed, okay? Hey, where's the switch in this goddamn thing?
A film about the making of a film that doesn't exist. A film where the director of the film is unknown. A film where narrative and reality confront one another like two cars violently colliding.
Camera B and C are both rolling, but there are no slates for this.
Personal note from Mr. Rosen to the assistant editor. The reason why all these slates are so fucked up is because they're not sure whether or not the action counts more or the slates count more. And so sometimes you get the slates and sometimes you get the action. So have fun, booby.
Director William Greaves aimed to find a unique method in which reality could be truly represented through cinema. He took multiple film crews and told each of them to film separate things, all the while he played a role other than that of himself. The result is an astonishing experiment at the nature of the power and ultimate confusion the moving image holds over us.
I mean, before we go any further, I mean, this is a note, sort of to Bill, when you watch this, Bill, and to anybody else out there who may be watching it too, if he decides to put this into the film. We are not trying to take the film away from Bill Greaves.
No, but just for 2 hours.
Well, for 2 hours, all right, but he's got the choice to, to edit this stuff any way he wants. So
this is the cinematic apotheosis of madness. It displays all the dissonance that the medium brings. When looked at objectively, it's made by fools. So what does that say about the people that watch it?
Yes. Okay, action! All right, clear out of the way here. Clear out of the way. Nikki, you come back this way. Behind me. No.
Alice, wait, Alice, here now, wait, no, wait a minute, wait, what? Oh, come on, please.
Perhaps that's why there's an endless slew of techniques to create it, because to believe in the magic of filmmaking, to accept and dissect and discuss and analyse the obvious illusion of reality, if that's what we do, then it's not hard to see why we are drawn to the madness so much.
Useless. For all anybody knows, you know, Bill is standing right outside the door, and he's directing this whole scene. All right, it could be. Nobody knows. Maybe we're all acting. All right, maybe we're all acting. You know, I mean, I'm acting. You know, and that's it. I mean, Bill could have stood outside of the door and told me, now, Rosen, when you get in there, you tell them about this. You know, when you get to a certain point. Nobody out there knows whether or not we're for real.
We'd like to thank Mubi for sponsoring this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service, an ever-changing collection of hand-picked films from new directors to award winners from everywhere on earth. Beautiful, interesting, incredible movies and a new one every single day, always chosen by Mubi. Right now on Mubi you can watch Bela Tarr's masterpiece Satan Tango. The lives of a farming collective in Hungary is changed when a person from the farm's past returns seemingly from nowhere, their existence becoming intertwined with the apocalyptic landscape that surrounds them. At over 7 hours in length and filled with the nihilistic cinematic lens that's unique to Tarr, there isn't another film quite like it. In length and filled with the nihilistic cinematic lens that's unique to Tarr, there isn't another film quite like it. You can try Mubi for free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinemacartography. That's